See, I was so glad to see you today, and I know, Sandra, you have two very important issues you're working on. One is the pipeline, and one is what's going on at Indian Point. You have a foot in both camps, which is a big footprint. Anyway, tell us, start with your name and tell us a little bit about what you're thinking as a result of your work and the information you've had today.
My name's Nancy Vann, and I'm the president of SEnRG Rights Group. That the name kind of says it. We're for safe energy, and so much of our energy infrastructure is not safe. Certainly, putting more carbon into the air from burning fossil fuels is not safe. Putting methane into the air from leaks from all of the pipeline and the fracking infrastructure is not safe. And one of the really big things that isn't safe is nuclear energy. From the point where they dig the uranium out of the ground, to processing uranium, to shipping uranium, to having it in the plants where there are always leaks. It's just not a safe energy system, and we fight against all of that. Uh, I started out working on the pipeline because it was coming through property of a little summer cabin community that I'm the president of. So my first concern about the pipeline was that it's going to dig up the wetlands and it's going to cut down trees, and that's not good for the environment. And then I went on to the internet and Googled frack gas pipelines, and you just can't forget what you learn about these things. I could not go back to not being an activist after that. Fortunately, it came up at a time I was retiring, so timing is pretty good on some things. Not a good time historically for Indian Point to be shutting down with our current political situation, but at the time I was retiring and I could do the research and found out about the fact that methane is 86 times as potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So, in addition to wetlands and trees, then you have methane. And then, well, what else is wrong with this particular pipeline? Well, it's going under the Hudson River. What damage could it do to the Hudson River? Oh, well, in the past, they haven't let pipelines go under the Hudson River because the bottom is full of PCBs and other toxins. And what if it disturbed the bottom? And that would kill off a lot of fish, and that would be bad for the water. And, so now you've got wetlands, trees, methane, and the Hudson River. Okay, so now what? Oh, it's going next to the Indian Point power plant, which is a nuclear power plant. Well, what would happen if something happened to the pipeline there, if there was a rupture to the pipeline there? Could that impact Indian Point? So we have a nuclear expert and we have a pipeline safety expert. The pipeline safety expert tells us that the blast radius from this particular pipeline could be 4,000 up to 4,000 feet. And our nuclear expert says, well, that could wipe out the spent fuel rods, pools, that could wipe out the electric switchyard that provides the electricity for the cooling system for the plant. It could wipe out the fuel for the backup generators in case the electricity goes out. Oh, well, what are the chances of having a pipeline rupture there? So you look at the safety record. In 2015, which is the latest we have data on, there was a serious pipeline rupture on the average of 6 times a week. And that's, when you multiply the risk of a pipeline rupture times what would happen, the catastrophe that would happen if anything happened at Indian Point, I mean, it just goes off any kind of risk scale. And you have to say, this is insane. There are 20 million people living within the 50-mile radius of Indian Point that would be in the maximum injury level, the maximum kill level, the high kill level, the high fatality level is 17 miles. And the evacuation zone is only 10 miles. And what they have for an evacuation, I'm supposed to leave my house, which is about 3 miles from Indian Point, and wait at a bus stop across the street to be evacuated. So once I learned about all of this, I was, like, okay, this is the rest of my life fighting what's going on here. And then I found out that not only is it the trees and the wetlands and the methane and the river and the radioactivity at Indian Point, but there are bomb trains that the pipeline goes over that could explode and cause a pipeline explosion. There are 2 earthquake fault lines that run right by where the pipeline runs next to Indian Point. And then it was like, how could I even tell people about this? And when I try to tell people about this, they say, oh, they're not going to do that. That's crazy. They would never do something like that. What on earth? So after trying to tell people about this for a long time, I've come up with some written material that's footnoted, because unless it's, in a written form with footnotes, people don't think it's true. So now I am occasionally able to convince people that this not only is what they were planning to do, but what they are well underway doing. And the pipeline is continuing to be built, although the segment that's right next to Indian Point is already in the ground. But of course, the pipeline is not what's the risk, it's the gas in the pipeline. So what our goal is to keep from having gas running through that pipeline. And so we're fighting stage 2, which is Atlantic Bridge, which is going to start right where this segment ends in Yorktown, which is a few miles down the road from us. But that, all of that said, the fact that they're now going to close Indian Point has people saying, oh, well, we don't have to worry about the pipeline now. We don't have to worry about Indian Point now. We don't have to worry about the earthquake fault lines or the river because it's closing down. And then you go to someone like Dr. Gordon Edwards, who tells you about how much nuclear waste is there and tells you about how impossible it is to get rid of that nuclear waste, and find out just what they're planning to do to shut the plant down, which is cut as many corners as possible, do it as cheaply as possible. And you realize we've got to step up for this too. We have to say this plant has to be shut down as safely as is humanly possible at this point. When Fukushima exploded, it was not because of the earthquake. The earthquake probably did some core damage or some damage to the buildings, but that wasn't what made it melt down. What made it melt down was when the tsunami took out the electricity to the plant. Yep. And that's what the pipeline is running right next to. It's 115 feet from the switchyard, and it's 105 feet from the backup generator fuel. So if the cooling system goes down, what happens, and what had happened at Fukushima, was that the water starts to evaporate and make steam inside the reactor because it isn't being cooled anymore. Then the steam reacts with the fuel pellets. What happens then? It oxidizes, and when the fuel pellets oxidize, it takes the oxygen out of the steam and releases hydrogen. Anybody who's seen things like the Hindenburg disaster know how explosive hydrogen is. So you have the fuel pellets pulling the oxygen away from the water to release hydrogen within the containment dome, and you get it exploding. And then the fuel pellets melt down even more. They eventually reach 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's a heat that will melt steel. So these fuel pellets are melting like candle wax. It's falling onto the floor of the reactor, it's melting the steel, and it's going into the earth, where almost every place you go down, you dig down, and you get the water level. There's a water table under, you know, almost every ground structure. I don't know about the Sahara Desert, how far you'd have to go down, but we are not the Sahara here. You go down a little ways and you reach these underground water, which is continually flowing. And it goes to the Hudson. And water carries things. So if there was any problem at Indian Point, and there's been problems with the tritium and the fuel rod pools leaking. So we've already got some radiation going into the ground under Indian Point. But to have a meltdown there, I mean, it would wipe out the East Coast. It would wipe out the financial center of the US. It would cause a worldwide financial crisis. And although we already have wars starting because of climate change, like in the Middle East, where drought is prompting refugees, which are prompting wars, if there was a worldwide financial meltdown, you have never seen wars and shortages and disasters like would be caused by that. And so every night when I'm sitting at my computer trying to stay awake while I'm typing out the stuff to let people know on Facebook or Twitter or sending out emails, I think, okay, 20 million people, end of the world scenario. Can I type for a few more minutes? And so you have no idea how many nights I fall asleep with my head on my computer keyboard, because how can you not? I mean, my feeling is, if you know this, and everybody should listen to what the videos of Dr. Edwards, everybody should listen to them, because if you know this, how can you not do everything you can to stop it? It is, I mean, it really, people are talking now, well, what would I have done if I had been there when the Nazis were taking over Germany? What would I have done? This is worse than any political or even any dictator situation. This is a situation with these nuclear plants that could destroy all life on Earth. And okay, so you've got a chance to save the world, participate with people, wonderful people, to save the world, or you can, have a donut and go to bed. And boy, am I looking forward to when all nuclear plants are closed and all nuclear fuel is at least in hardened, and it has to be hardened cast, not these thin-walled things that they're talking about doing on the cheap. And all of the contaminated soil and contaminated water has been encapsulated in the best available technology. And some sort of stewardship program has been instituted where the industry and the NRC are not responsible for the waste, but an entity that only cares about human safety, human health, is in place to care for this, to monitor it, to change it to better containment when that technology becomes available. Maybe then I can have a donut and go to sleep. But until that time, I'm so happy to be helping Marilyn work on this and trying to get our elected officials on board. I mean, Governor Cuomo really has to step up on this. Governor Cuomo is and our wonderful Attorney General have to step up to say this has to be done as safely as possible. The state needs to set up an organization, an agency to oversee nuclear decommissioning in New York State. We have to tell Governor Cuomo to do that, and he has to listen to us. And our Eric Schneiderman has to come in every time it looks like they're cutting a corner and sue them over it. And one of the things that enabled Governor Cuomo didn't shut Indian Point down. The economy shut Indian Point down, but Entergy couldn't have done it without Governor Cuomo and Riverkeeper agreeing to withdraw their lawsuits. So there had to be that agreement. They enabled it. They enabled Entergy shutting it down. But the agreement that's in place, they only agreed to not sue over things that are already happening. They didn't agree to not sue over the things like a dry cask that they're putting things into in an unsafe manner, or an unsafe dry cask, or one of the fuel pools now springs a leak because they're taking things in and out of it too fast. So both the state and Riverkeeper can bring lawsuits against Entergy, the owner of Indian Point, when we're going through this decommissioning process, if they're not doing it properly. And we have to have them watching every minute. And we have to watch every minute. And we have to get more people on board so that, so that once a week I can go to sleep and somebody else is at their computer, and that Marilyn can go to sleep once a week so that it was somebody else at her computer. And her wonderful journalist husband, who writes so much about the technical aspects of this, and explained the baffle bolts in a way that I looked at his pictures and I read it, and I could understand exactly why the fact that these baffle bolts, 25% of them were failing or failed or missing, why that was so important, because the baffles are what keeps the water going over the core to cool it, so that it doesn't create steam and, hydrogen and blow up the containment dome. So, we all working on it together, and it's just such great people that are doing this so much. But, we just have to keep going, keep getting people involved, keep getting more people that have gone through decommissioning processes or are in the process of doing decommissioning to become educated about the science and about how to do it the best way possible, and what the decay products are, and how long it takes radon to create polonium-210 and lead-210. The people doing the pipeline, we asked them, well, when the radon decays, what does it make? They didn't know. We looked on the internet and found out in, about 15 minutes. You can educate yourself. Yeah. Just Google it. And then the next meeting you say, well, you didn't know at the last meeting. This is what it does. And has a half-life of 24,000 years. So, we've got to educate everyone and get them all out there fighting on our side.
Educate everyone and get them all out taking care of their clean air and their clean water.
It is our clean air and our clean water because we live here.
That's right.
And, Entergy doesn't live here. Spectra doesn't live here.
Nope. Corporations don't live and breathe.
I sometimes, when my more paranoid moments, think, Spectra, the pipeline company, is in Houston. Maybe they're trying to make Houston the financial capital of the world by wiping out New York City.
Hopefully they're bad, but not that bad. Okay.
They're not doing that. But they just, they want to keep their jobs, and they don't care how they keep them, whether they poison us or not. And it's the same FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that oversees pipelines, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC that oversees nuclear plants. It's the same thing. They're all people from the industry. They are in favor of the industry. They are funded by the industry. And that's where their fees come from. They want to keep their jobs. They want to keep the industry happy. So
Thank you for doing this interview. Thank you for being here today, and we will both keep on keeping on. It's not a bad way to live a life, is it, Nancy?
no, it isn't, especially when you get to live your life in connection with such wonderful people, all fighting for the same thing, which is clean air and water.
That's right. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.